We are TFR.
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
Truth Frequency Radio.
What if all we thought we knew of truth was sequestered upon lies, carefully manufactured science, and craftily complicated algorithms meant undecipherable, tricked into denying common sense, visual observation, and orientation? We are led to obscure equation said to be answer for determining belief, and asked to discredit self-platitudes for ghostly assertions and scientifically established professional opinion. There is no curvature and no motion to the foundational earth, and yet most adamantly oppose even those experiments firmly rooted in evidentiary truth. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed. And I thank you for taking the time to join me this evening. And I'm really excited about bringing forth the information I have lined up for you today. It is definitely going to be a journey, so fasten your seatbelts because we're going deep down the rabbit hole. I want to give thanks really quick to Flatwater for the information that he's brought forth in a video that he did as far as what is truly at the North Pole. And I'm going to read some information from Mercator's letter to John D. to set as foundation what we're going to be speaking about this evening. And then I'm going to bring forth several other sources and reference to establish what I consider to be a very profound truth. And it's most certainly not anything that is unique to my own research and study. There have been people over the past hundreds of years, even probably, as far as the biblical scriptures, thousands of years in advance of my coming to this revelation, that have shared and encoded it into books as obscure as the Book of Enoch, which just recently came back to light. And it's my opinion that it was done so, and it was preserved as part of the Ethiopic canon in order to administer and also to assist the whole awakening that is taking place, especially in connection to flat Earth. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing this information with you, and also into going into some of this source reference material. And so let me begin with something that I just recently shared in a very short video, which you can find a lot of my guest appearances and my work under YouTube under Endeavor Freedom. That's the name that I publish. Other radio broadcasts that I do, these as well as these guest appearances. And I just recently published a short 15-minute video talking about a couple of passages that I discovered in the book of Enoch, which um, I'm working on a follow-up to the 400-page release of my ninth book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, which those of you that know and have studied my work know that I decrypt by utilizing the flat earth as model for world, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which is like, I believe it's like 14 chapters in the book of Enoch, chapter 70 through 84, I believe. And in this particular portion of the text, Enoch shares very detailed description of the motions of both the sun and the moon, and not the earth and the moon, because of course we know, according to scripture, that the earth, as far as the model of the world, it's geocentric, not heliocentric, and that that it's unmoving, it's fixed and stationary, and that the earth was created as foundation for what would be the firmament, which was fitted to it, and the heavens, which were spread across a broad, its length and width, being a circular, flat circular, as it says in Isaiah chapter 40. But I'm going to just cover this really quick because I want to go into this other material. But I thought it would be interesting for me to share this with you, especially those of you that don't know about my other work through YouTube and may not be aware of my channel. And so the specific passage I'm going to be referencing is chapter 53, verse 7, and also chapter 55, verse 2. In chapter 53, verse 7, I was really kind of blown away to discover this particular passage because it's been there the whole time. And of course, it depends on which translation you are reading from. There's the Richard Lawrence and also the R.H. Charles translation. But I was reading from the collected works, the pseudepigraphal collected works, book 1, which is like a 400-page collection of all these extra biblical, extra canonical texts, which accompany the revelation and truth that is found in the Old and New Testament. And it was in rereading the book of Enoch that I came across this. And so it says in 53:7, and these mountains shall become flat like earth in the presence of his righteousness, and the hills shall become like a fountain of water, and the righteous one shall have rest from the oppression of sinners. And so, you know, how much more plain can you get? The mountains shall become flat like earth in the presence of his righteousness. I mean, fascinating material. Chapter 55, verse 2. And Yahweh swore by his own great name that from henceforth he would not do as he had done to all who live upon the earth. And he said, I shall put up a sign in the heavens, and it shall become a symbol of faith between me and them forever, as long as heaven is above the earth, which in accordance with my command. And so the particular passage that I want to reference in chapter 55, verse 2 is, as long as heaven is above the earth, which is also connected to chapter 74 in the book of Enoch, where it says this, and the days Uriel showed me, the angel whom the Lord of glory appointed over all the luminaries of heaven, and in the world, that they might rule in the face of the sky, and appearing over the earth, become conductors of the days and nights, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the ministers of heaven, which make their circuit with all the chariots of heaven. And so you can see how this fits above the earth, and also it connects to Psalms 19, which talks about the circuit of the sun, where it says that their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. Now, what makes me bring up these two particular passages, besides the one which specifically mentions the mountains becoming like the earth flat, is that over the holidays, I was also outside reading Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, in the book of Ecclesiastes, and I found a passage in there which also relates to Psalms 19. And after this particular passage, then I'm actually going to move into the other material. But I thought it would be really interesting to bring forth this material for you so that you can cite it and go and study it for yourself, because I know there's a lot of pastors recently that have come out against the flat earth. I'm not going to name any names, but there are a number of them, and they totally say this is unscriptural, but it's my opinion they haven't done any kind of a in-depth analysis or study of the scriptures, and because there's so much that otherwise could not be made sense of, such as Joshua's long day and the sun going backwards on the sundial in Isaiah and 2 Kings. But in Ecclesiastes, this particular passage fits with the circuit of the sun and the tabernacle of the sun mentioned in Psalm 19, as well as the heavenly luminaries moving in circuit above the earth, and the heavens being above the earth as well, and that the earth is under the heavens, as it says in that chapter 55. But from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, it says this in verse 3, "What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose." And so again, the description of the sun having a circuit and moving, just as it says in Psalms 19, that it has a circuit and it's actually moving above the earth, and that the earth is below the heavens, as these particular passages reference. But I looked up I searched out under the sun in the King James Version of the Bible, and found that you can find it cited 29 times under the sun in the book of Ecclesiastes. And Solomon, who wrote the particular book, he speaks about how all is folly under the sun. And in a heliocentric worldview, where the earth is supposedly spinning, around the sun, and the sun is motionless in the center of the solar system, even though it's supposedly also orbiting some grand galactic center. The sun is to the side of the earth and not above it, as it says here, but according to the flat earth model, it fits absolutely perfect with that model and the description it found here in the scripture as well as in the book of Enoch, and that the sun indeed does move in circuit in clockwise fashion above the earth and around the Arctic, the polar regions. And so, if when somebody argues, because there are many, they're deniers, and they say the scriptures have no, support for the flat earth. Well, these are some things that you can bring forth. All right, we're going to go ahead and go into, because I know the show will, and I'm definitely going to be doing, I got so much information, a series on this, but I want to open this particular look into the paradise being located at the North Pole. By opening with an article you can find from Pravda, and I've posted it, I believe, at my fallenangels.tv website. But the name of the article, and you can search it out yourself, is Russian Scientist Finds Paradise at the North Pole, which is also in support of a book that was released in 1885, which also speaks about the same thing. And Kathy is actually going to share a link with you where you can download the text for yourself. And it's quite interesting reading. And I'm going to, at some point, bring out some of that information from that text, but not in this show, because there's more that I want to go into. And I actually ordered a hard copy of the text, and so I will be reading the book for myself. And as I do so, I'll highlight what I learned from it, and at that time I will share further information and revelation from it. But this particular article was published in 2006. It's a short article, but very informative, and so I'm going to just read it in whole. Doctor of Philosophy Valerie Diemen, a researcher of the Arctic region, maintains that Hyperborea, which we will be talking about that as well, the mythology and the lore connected to Hyperborea, which means beyond the Boreas, the north wind, a mythical land that the Greeks thought was located beyond Scythia, existed in reality. The legendary French scientist Jean-Sylvain Bailly attempted to prove the existence of Hyperborea a few centuries ago. Could you name any other scientists who also made a lot of effort trying to shed some light on the mystery of Hyperborea? Yes, there were many of them. Not only the geographers and historians worked on the problem, the linguists also made several contributions. The rector of the University of Boston, William Warren, published a book titled Paradise Found at the North Pole in the late 19th century. It was 1885, if I'm correct. In total, there were 11 editions of the book. Warren analyzed a large number of spoken stories and legends relating to paradise on earth, Eden. According to him, all the information contained therein stems from vague recollections of some ancient, perfect land that lay somewhere in the Arctic region. Now, think about, as a side note, think about the Genesis creation story and how it talks about the Garden of Eden, which in my book, my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, I talk about the differences between paradise, which is found at the third heaven, and the Garden of Eden. Because paradise is where Adam and Eve had fallen from, and were exiled, banished from. And the Garden of Eden is where they ended up being placed after they were cast out. And they were, located in a place called the Cave of Treasures, which, according to the mythology and the stories that I'm going to be sharing, the Cave of Treasures was located somewhere near the top initially, near either on what is referenced as Meru, or the magnetic mountain Sumeru, which is also referenced as Olympus, and also the mountain of God, which is cited in Ezekiel chapter 28, where Lucifer says that he's going to exalt himself above the stars of God, and the throne of the Most High, which also is spoken of in Revelation and in other places in Ezekiel, not only 28 but chapter 1. And so I'm going to share all that with you as well, but I'm going to go through this article. But just to give you something to think about as I read through this article. What exactly are we talking about? Which part of the world should we be looking at? I believe we should be looking for the traces of that civilization in Eurasia and American Arctic regions, in the islands and archipelagos of the Arctic oceans. At the bottom of some seas, lakes, and rivers, it's worthy of notice that Russia has the largest number of locations and artifacts that could bear relevance to Hyperborea. Some of the above have already drawn attention of specialists, others are yet to be discovered. Active exploration is currently underway in the Kola Peninsula, in the island of Vygok, in Karelia, Ura Mountains, West Siberia, Caucasia, Yakutia, and a few other regions. There are good prospects for conducting research in Franz Josef Land, Tamir, and Yamal. The geographic term Hyperborean platform is a technical use. Scientists keep discussing the platform's dynamics in order to find out the reasons why it sank to the bottom of the ocean. A side note here as well. Others would say that Paradise is also referenced as Atlantis, and that Atlantis could be this legendary land at the North Pole as well. And it's interesting to note, because those of you that follow my work, you know that I am working on bringing forth into the English, working with a couple of friends of mine, translating the Thracian chronicles. And according to some of these accounts in the Thracian chronicles, Thrace was found at the North Pole, which is interesting because I just received the first 8 chapters of a book called The Chronicle of Longinus, and I'm going to share with you some interesting references in that particular text, which just blew my mind today when I received it, because it also is speaking about what I'm talking about here. And also I'm going to share some information from the Thracian Book of Atum and Ua, which is going to be mind-blowing as well. Also, Kathy, if you would, share the Bible code that I found, which talks about the North Pole and there being a whirlpool, and also that the North Pole, that the sides of the north, as referenced in Scripture, that it's a doorway, a portal, like a like a passage to the upper heavens, as well as the throne of God. And so let me continue before I get to the first break. In other words, Hyperborea may have stretched over the lands that eventually sank into the water, question mark. One of the charts by Gerhardus Mercator, the 16th century Flemish cartographer and geographer, shows a huge continent lying in the vicinity of the North Pole. The land is an archipelago composed of several islands divided by deep rivers. A mountain sits in the center of the land, according to legends. The ancestors of the Indo-Europeans lived near Mount Meru. The question is, how did that land appear on the chart? There was no information whatsoever regarding the Arctic regions during the Middle Ages. We have some reasons to believe that Mercator had used an ancient chart, the one that is mentioned in his letter dated to 1580. That chart showed a continent located in the center of the Arctic Ocean, which was pictured ice-free on the chart. Mercator's chart seems to be based on the ancient chart. You can look up the Mercator projection map, and you'll see that he shows this what is called the Black Mountain. It's a lodestone mountain, a magnetic mountain, and it was said to be as tall as where the moon is above the earth. All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to finish up with this particular article just to set the stage for the rest of the show. And then I'm going to go into some of the Mercator testimony and then cover the other sources and references, which also link to and will highlight the information that I'm sharing right now. It says this: assuming that the ancient cartographic information was available for the chosen ones in days of old, has anybody tried to search for Hyperborea in the Arctic region? Quote, some of our compatriots participated in the quest for Hyperborea. The Russian Empress Catherine II got some information of the ancient mythical land near the Arctic Circle via the Freemasons. Catherine II organized 2 expeditions with the help of Michael Lomonosov. She signed a secret decree on May 4th, 1764. The official documents indicated that the expedition, headed by Admiral Vasily Shikogov, had been dispatched to Spitsbergen to inspect the location for the renewal of whaling and fishing out there. However, the endeavor is referred to as an expedition bound for the North Pole in the memoirs of Shikogov's son. The master was ordered to open an envelope with detailed instruction only after his vessel had made for the open sea. According to instructions, the vessel was to head into the direction of the North Pole. Those instructions were penned by Lomonosov. Unfortunately, the expedition couldn't break through the thick ice and had to turn back. Why was Catherine II so interested in finding Hyperborea? I believe that Catherine, not unlike a few other kings and queens, was enchanted by the prospects of discovering the elixir of eternal youth, which is said to have been invented by the Hyperboreans. Pliny and Herodotus, as well as Virgil and Cicero, reported that people in the land of Hyperborea lived to the age of 1,000 and enjoyed lives of complete happiness. We shouldn't forget that the empress was a woman. All right, I would also state that Adam through Noah, the first 10 generations, that they also lived these very expanded lifespans. Adam lived 930 years. I believe the longest, as far as the lifespan, was Methuselah, and that he lived 977 years, if I'm correct. But anyways, I'm going to read just a little bit about Hyperborea, because it was said to be surrounded and encircled by the ocean, Oceanus. And there's some images out there which show paradise being, again, located in the north with this magnetic mountain and a whirlpool that is sucking all of these four rivers, and it flows into what is the subterranean regions of the earth, and that these subterranean regions of the earth are divided into the place of for the righteous, Abraham's bosom, and also the place of the wicked. And that these two chambers, some say that it's more than two chambers, but that these were the places where the souls of the dead go in order to be housed in waiting for judgment. And that there's a gulf, the Arturian lake, which divides them and keeps the wicked and the righteous separated. All right, a little bit about Hyperborea, and then we're going to go into some of this other information. Hyperborea was usually described as a continent-bound land bordered by the great earth, encircling river Oceanus to the north and the great peaks of the mythical Riparian Mountains to the south. Its main river was the Eridanus, which flowed south, drawing its waters directly from the ocean stream. The shores of the stream were lined by amber-bearing poplar trees, and its waters inhabited by flocks of white swans. Blessed with eternal spring, the land producing 2 crops of grain per year, but most of the country was wild, covered with rich and beautiful forests, the garden of Apollyon, which is interesting because there's also mention, if you think about the shape and visualize how it was that Atlantis was said to be 10 rings, that it was a ring of land and a ring of ocean, a ring of land and a ring of ocean, till it branched out into 10 portions, 5 of land and 5 of ocean. And so these concentric rings are said to be possibly the oceans which are surrounding this northern land, and that these 4 rivers which are cited in Genesis, that these are the 4 rivers which empty into this indwelling sea, and also to this particular whirlpool, which, for those of you that have looked up and pulled up the Bible code that I was able to find, there's mention again of the North Pole, a whirlpool, that this was a portal, a gate, a doorway, which, finding all of these terms in one particular matrix is interesting in of itself. But the fact that it confirms what Mercator describes in his letter to John D. and what we are talking about as far as Hyperborea and what we will go into as far as Scripture, because after I read from Mercator's testimony, I'm going to share some Scripture. I might even read 1 or 2 before the Mercator material, just to give you an idea of how this fits and, relates to what I'm going to be reading as far as the letter to John D. Just a little bit more as far as Hyperborea. To the south, the realm was guarded by the bitterly cold peaks of the near impassable Ripanian Mountains. This was the home of Boreas, god of the north wind, whose chill breath brought winter to all the lands to the south. Scythia, Thrace, Istria, Celtica, Italy, and Greece, the peaks of the mountains were also the home of griffins, eagle lions, and its valleys were inhabited by the fierce, one-eyed Armispoia tribe. Directly to the south lay Pitorphorus, a desolate snow-covered land cursed by eternal winter. And when I go into the mythologies of some of the lands of the north, it speaks about how this land was protected from destruction, and that is why the Hyperboreans were able to live very long lives. But there's also mention of a race of pygmies that lived there, and it's also interesting that Mercator speaks about these beings in his particular discussion as well. All right, just a little bit more. The land appears in several myths. The first of these was the story of Phaeton, the boy who tried to fly the chariot of the sun, but lost control and was struck down by Zeus with a thunderbolt. His flaming body fell into the Hyperborean river Eridanos, where his mourning sisters, the Heliades, gathered and were transformed into amber-shedding poplar trees. Another thing about this particular area is you will find the mention of these trees, and there's also the world tree, Yggdrasil, and the mention of, as far as paradise, it describes the tree of the life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's also a reference to this in Revelation chapter 2, verse 7, where it says, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God." And so I'll be talking about the differences between paradise and the Garden of Eden when I elaborate on this, but let me continue with this particular information. I'm actually going to skip down because I don't want to run out of time. And so just a little bit about the northern lands. The first continent is known as the imperishable sacred land. It is the most mysterious of the 7 continents. It is said to be located in the region of the North Pole. This sacred land is stated never to have shared the fate of the other continents because it is the only one whose destiny it is to last from the beginning to the end of the Maravantara. Throughout each round, it is the cradle of the first man and the dwelling of the last divine mortal, chosen as a shista for the future seed of humanity. Another thing that is spoken about is that when New Jerusalem descends, that this is the place that it will descend. And it also speaks about in some of the passages that I've found that Jerusalem, the city of truth, which is Jerus, and Salam means the city of peace, that it is actually also referencing the North Pole, which is interesting according to some of the other material that I will share. Just a little bit more. Of this mysterious and sacred land, very little can be said except perhaps according to a poetical expression in one of the commentaries that the pole star has its watchful eye upon it from the dawn to the close of the twilight of a day of the great breath. Also, that, as I was saying before we went to the first break, this mountain is supposed to be so high, and this is where at the top of it, the throne of God is, and that, we have the reference in Isaiah chapter 66 as that the earth is the footstool of the Most High God. Well, many say, even like in these other passages and descriptions of the sacred mountain Meru or the sacred mountain Moriah, Olympus, that God or the gods live at the top of it. Now, what is interesting to me when I bring out some of these other passages is that it also references that the Elohim are there with the Most High, surrounding him as he sits on the throne of God. And so, both would be correct, even though we know that gods with little g, that they are nothing more than the angels of the Most High. All right, just a little bit more about this sacred land, and then I'm going to go into reading the Mercator text, because that is truly fascinating material. The first continent surrounded and included the North Pole and extended somewhat southwards from the pole in 7 different zones, like the leaves of a lotus. These zones included Greenland, Spitsbergen, Sweden, Norway, and Siberia, together with other former land areas in the far north that have since been submerged. The central locality of the first continent was right at the North Pole, which is cited by Helena Blavatsky in some of her writings. This is interesting as well. If the earth is hollow, as Blavatsky review of the hollow globe by Lyon and Sherman implies, then the first continent could refer to 2 different things: the polar land on the outer surface of the earth and the sacred central land or inner circle in the earth's interior, which will continue to exist until the earth reaches the end of its life period. Remember, I said that there's this whirlpool that leads to the subterranean regions of the earth. And that also there's the description of Sheol as being in the interior of the earth. I'm going to read a passage from Plato describing the concentric circles found in Atlantis, which again is speculation that this could be the polar northern regions. Poseidon fell in love with her and had intercourse with her, and breaking the ground enclosed the hill in which she dwelt all round, making alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another. There were 2 of land and 3 of water, which he turned as with a lathe out of the center of the island, equidistant every way, so that no man could get to the island, for ships and voyages were not yet heard of. Speaking of Poseidon, which those of you that study Sumerian mythology, is Enki, and Enlil would be that of Zeus. And, again, it says that Poseidon fell in love with Clito and that she was an earthling, and that, just like, sort of like with the Fallen Watchers, that the story was repeated way back in previous times. All right. One more thing as far as Shambhala, because it is also spoken about. I just want to share a dream and just a little bit about Shambhala, also the same thing. But it's interesting that some of the mythology of Shambhala speaks about and references the Antichrist or the release of giants, and also that the Nagas, these dragon-like reptilian beings, that they protect Shambhala and that they live there. And there's a passage in the Cave of Treasures, which I have shared in my fourth book, which talks about 39 giant tribes being locked up in the place of the north during Alexander's time, and that they would be released at a later date. Maybe over the next break, I'll see if I can find that passage and share it with you. It's quite interesting as well. It is prophesied that a future king of Shambhala will come with a great army to free the world from the barbarism and tyranny, and will usher in a golden age. Similarly, the Hindu Puranas say that a future world redeemer will come out of Shambhala. Interesting, huh? It is regarded in most esoteric traditions as the true center of the plane, as the world's spiritual powerhouse and the heartland of a brotherhood of adepts from every race and country who have been influential in every major religion, every scientific advance, and every social movement in history. All right, here's the dream, and then we'll go to the Mercator text. Birnbaum once had a dream of going with a guide to the North Pole. As they approached the pole, the air became warmer and the snow covered thinner until there was only grassy tundra, flowers, and a balmy breeze. Finally, they came to a round pond with a small island that had a pole right at the center. He turned to his guide and protested, "But this is impossible. This can't be the North Pole. There's supposed to be ice and snow up here." The guide merely pointed at the island and said with a smile, "There's the pole." Birnbaum related his dream to Lama Shopia Trikin Rinpoche, who remarked, "That may have been the entrance to Shambhala." All right, we're going to go into the Mercator text because we're almost to the next break. It's interesting that Mercator also describes King Arthur as being one that had sought these northern realms. So to open the discussion of Mercator's, the description of the northern realms to John Dee, it says this. In a previous paper, the present writer described the efforts of John Dee to reform the map of Northeast Asia as recorded in his volume of Great and Rich Discoveries. The final chapter of this manuscript has the following title: that all these northern isles and septentrional parts are lawfully appropriated to the crown of the British Empire, and the terrible adventure and great loss of the British people and other of King Arthur and his subjects perishing about the first discovery thereof, and the placing of colonies in the same isles and regions by the same King Arthur, and an entire and general description of all the parts of the world within 12 degrees of the North Pole, and somewhat more. But in spite of this promising summary of what was to come, we find only a short account of how Dee set to work to collect information, followed by a transcript of the brief and disjointed notes sent to him by Mercator. These notes are made even more difficult to follow by the fact that Dee's manuscript has been badly damaged by fire, so that there are many lacunae. Yet the notes, partly in Old Dutch and partly in Latin, are of great interest, and so an attempt has been made to render their meaning by a rather free translation. But as will appear, they raise new anew several problems which still defy solution and which will be discussed at the end of the transcript. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go into this. As I said, this is from 1577. All right. Familiarly, and the chief pith of this chapter will testify the honest and philosophical regards that he had of my earnest and request to him, inasmuch as speedily he returned the very principal authority whereupon fashioned unto us that strange plat of the septernal lands. It says this: to the most famous Dr. John Dee, his master and most esteemed patron, at Montrec on the Thames near London, with these 3 enclosures. There's a few lines missing. To send, fearing it would not reach you quickly enough if transmission were delayed, I have written down everything you have about the northern regions, and to these, Jacobus Canoian of Herzegovinisch traveled the world like Mandeville, but described what he saw with better judgment. He wrote in the Belgic language the ideas about the northern region, which some time ago I extracted from him, follow word for word, save where, for the sake of brevity or speed, I have translated into Latin, when, if not always, his words, I have retained his meaning. In North Norway, which is called Dusky Norway, there are 3 months of darkness during which there is no sunlight, but a perpetual twilight. This North Norway lies over against the country called the Province of Darkness, or Obscure Province. In Latin, Provincia Tenebrosa. Concerning it, however, there is nothing written in Marco Polo, and this Province of Darkness, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. I want to give you a passage just to think about as we're going through and when I revisit the Mercator text. And I'm going to read it, but I just want to read really quick. Think about this, what is described in Revelation 4. It says, out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf. Third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast like a flying eagle. All right. Think about this sea of glass. Now, I'm going to go back to the Mercator text, and then when I get down a little bit further, you'll see how this applies to this. All right. From North Norway, you cannot reach the indrawing sea, which lies beyond Grockland, for it lies still further northward. This North Norway stretches as far as the mountain range which encompasses the North Pole, and borders on this mountain range for about 17 miles by land. The rest is all sea, and this is the same mountain range which, within about 15 French miles, and then stands further off towards the east. And near here, towards the north, those little people live, of whom there is also mention in the Gestae Arthuriae, that's the name of the book that talks about King Arthur's visit and trip to the northern lands, which I'll mention some of that after I read some of this text here. And there borders on it besides a beautiful open land, and this land lies between the province of darkness and the province of Burgai. But between such of these provinces and these lands lies an indrawing sea. And this province, the open land, has a mountain border of over 72 French miles by land. These facts and more about the geography of the North are to be found in the beginning of the Gestae Arthuriae. The islands adjacent to the North Pole were formerly called Scilly, perhaps Thule. I would also say Thrace. And now the Septentrionalist lands, among them is North Norway, and there are many small rivers, some two, some one, some three, kennings wide, more or less, and these are called indrawing seas, because the current always flows northward so strongly that no wind can make a ship sail back against it. And here it is all ice from October to March, and in these latitudes the mountains reach up to the clouds and are almost all rock, bare of vegetation. I want to make a comment here as well. In the book of Enoch, there's a description of 4 different colored mountains made of 4 different metals. And some of the Hopi prophecies and some of these other native prophecies and indigenous peoples' prophecies, they speak of these 4 colored mountains as well, and that they are a portion, they surround what is the Black Mountain, which is the magnetic mountain, the lodestone mountain, which is, Mount Meru or Moriah or Mount Olympus, whatever you call it. And it's this particular mountain that reaches up to the where the moon is, which is why during a lunar eclipse, because those of us that have come to understand the flat Earth as model of world, that's one of the things that the heliocentricists always reference to try to, discredit the flat Earth as model of the world. And it's one of the hardest things to understand. But when you look at and you cite some of these ancient maps, you'll see that in the magnetic north, where the North Pole is, there's this magnetic mountain, and there's references to the pole star. And we don't know exactly what that is, but we know it's not the shadow of the earth, because the earth is never between the sun and the moon, that it's not the shadow of the earth which is casting, that the shadow across the face of the moon, and which causes lunar eclipses. And it's my opinion that it's either some aspect of this magnetic mountain or this pole star, which is the cause for the lunar eclipses. All right, continuing. And here it is all ice from October to March, and in these latitudes the mountains reach up to the clouds. See, the mountains reach up to the clouds and are almost all rock, bare of vegetation, and it is almost always misty and dull weather, and it is well known that beyond 70 or 78 degrees latitude there is no human habitation. Moreover, this 78th parallel goes in a circle round the Arctic pole in the form of a high mountain range. Part of the army of King Arthur, which conquered the northern islands and made them subject to him, and we read that nearly 4,000 persons entered the indrawing seas, who never returned. But in AD 1364, 8 of these people came to the king's court in Norway. Among them were 2 priests, one of whom had an astrolabe, who was descended in the 5th generation from a Bruxellanus. One, I say, the 8 were sprung from those who had penetrated the northern regions in the first ship. That great army of Arthur's had lain all the winter of 530 AD in the northern islands of Scotland, and on May 3rd, a part of it crossed over into Iceland. Then 4 ships of the aforesaid land had come out of the north and warned Arthur of the indrawing seas, so that Arthur did not proceed further, but peopled all the islands between Scotland and Iceland, and also peopled Grockland. So it seems the indrawing sea only begins beyond Grockland. In this Grockland, he found people 23 feet tall, which that's a mistranslation. As you read further in the text, it will say 23 people 4 feet tall. That is to say, of the feet with which land is measured. When those 4 ships returned, there were sailors who asserted that they knew where the magnetic lands were. Arthur afterwards put on board a fleet of 12 ships, about 1,800 men and about 400 women. They sailed northwards on May 3rd in the year following that in which the former ships had departed. And of these 12 ships, 5 were driven on the rocks in a storm, but the rest of them made their way between the high rocks on June 18th, which was 44 days after they had set out. More precisely, perhaps, some of them made their way. The priest who had the astrolabe related to the king of Norway that in AD 1360 there had come to these northern islands an English minorite from Oxford who was a good astronomer, etc. Leaving the rest of the party who had come to the islands, he journeyed further through the whole of the north, etc., and put into writing all the wonders of those islands, and gave the King of England this book, which he called in Latin Inventio Fortunata, which book began at the last climate, that is to say, latitude 54 degrees, continuing to the pole. This monk said that the mountain range goes round the north like a wall, save that in 19 places the indrawing channels flow through it, whereof the widest is not above 12 French miles across, the narrowest 3/4 of a mile. And through the narrowest no ship would be able to go, because of the strong rush of the water. The mountain range is surrounded by a sea except in North Norway, when the Norwegian mountain range reaches it for a width of about 17 miles. And right under the North Star, opposite Norway, there lies a fair level land which is uninhabited, where many beautiful, there's broken passage. In the east there stretches out an arm of the land which is nearly all wooded and narrow continuously the farther north, the more so that it is not more than 1 mile wide, where it meets the mountain range. Otherwise no land touches the circumference of mountains anywhere, but in many places the sea is so narrow that one can see the far side. And the mountain range covers a breadth of 8 miles, and in the whole circle, said the Minorite, there is no habitation except on the east side, where that narrow land already mentioned there were 23 people not above 4 feet tall, whereof 16 were women. This monk said that in 2 other places further inland he found a great piece of ship's planking and other balks which had been used in big ships, besides many trunks of trees which at some earlier date had been hewn down, so that he could say that with certainty that there had formerly been habitation there, but the people had now gone, and that the country where they, the pygmies, lived was more than 6 degrees broad, that is to say 20 days' journey, and one could cover the distance on foot, and it was 10 degrees long. That is 33 days' journey. Also there lay there, said he, an indrawing sea of 5 channels gathered together, which came through the mountain range out of the 19 channels mentioned. And the indrawing sea is 12 French miles wide and measures across about 4 days' journey. Just a little bit more here. And at the west of the aforesaid country is another indrawing sea, into which 3 more channels go out of the aforesaid 19. And that channel which they, the ships I believe are meant, had entered also flowed therein, and all these channels which turn tortuously when they come out of the mountain drive ships immediately ashore, but whatever channel flowed straight into the innermost seas, into which the 19 channels gather, in these ships must of necessity be carried current-wise and become lost. Also said this Minorite, these innermost seas number 4. Remember the 4 rivers, and the difference between paradise and which I'll get into next. And on the other side of the sea was the best and healthiest land in all the north. Also, he said that the sea which lay on the east side could never be frozen, because so many channels united there. And it was narrow besides, so that the current was very strong, but that the one which ran on the west side used to freeze almost every year, and remain frozen sometimes for 3 months. And that the land he had seen no signs of habitation, but in a country which lay to the north opposite it, he had recognized planks of ships and tree trunks. All of these 4 countries are high open lands, plateaus, except some mountains 4 fathom high. There are many trees of Brazil wood when this priest with the astrolabe, and then it breaks up, and then it goes to, in the midst of the 4 countries is a whirlpool, into which there empty these 4 indrawing seas, which divide the north, and the water rushes round and descends into the earth, just as if one were pouring it through a filter funnel. It is 4 degrees wide on every side of the pole, that is to say 8 degrees altogether, except that right under the pole there lies a bare rock in the midst of the sea. Its circumference is almost 33 French miles, and it is all of magnetic stone, and is as high as the clouds. So the priest said, who had received the astrolabe from this Minorite in exchange for a testament, and the Minorite himself had heard that one can see all around it from the sea, and it is black and glistening, and nothing grows thereon, for there is not so much as a handful of soil on it. That was the writing and words of the Minorite, who was since journeyed to and fro 5 times for the King of England on business. They are to be found in a book called the Inventio Fortunae, of which the Minorite himself was author. The aforesaid priest and said also to the king of Norway that in the country where he dwelt, not 6 times a year did it rain, and even that was drizzle, lasting no more than 6 or 7 hours. And so you see that I'm almost done. I'll finish and then I'll comment. Lacuna, the wind never blows hard enough to drive a corn mill. Furthermore, the air there is always cool, and the other 7 that were with him testified that they had also heard such things as he related, said by their elders, but had never seen them. This is a word for word everything that I copied out of the author Canoian years ago. Farewell, most learned man, with my most affectionate esteem, Gerard Mercator. And that's the end of the translation. So So you see that these indrawing seas, they merge in 4 places and run into this whirlpool. And that this whirlpool is swirls around the magnetic mountain, and that this is the magnetic mountain which all of our compasses point towards. Interesting, huh? And so, if you, which I'm going to go into some of this description as to some of this other text. And also just look up the Mercator map and you'll see the image that he's drawn. Because he just fixed this particular map before he died in 1984 is when, I mean, not 1984, 1584 is when he passed away. And it was right before then that he was able to complete this map. Now, if you look up and find the full text of what I'm reading from, it's 15 pages long. And I only read from the Mercator testimony to John D. I didn't read all the commentary, which, you can read that for yourself. I want to get into some of this other material. And as I had stated earlier, I'm going to be doing a follow-up to this particular show and probably a couple other shows on this information because, as I said, I got so much. And it's going to take me a little while to bring all of this forth. All right. Let me go back to what I was talking about as far as the Revelation 4 and also the Revelation 15, because this is going to set the whole premise for the 3 heavens and there being at the North Pole, that this is also where there's a portal, the gateway. And, because it says also that the North Pole is where the ladder for the angels descending and ascending into heaven. And that, this is also the place where the mountain of God, that this Moriah, Olympus, this magnetic mountain, this is the mountain of God, which is mentioned in this. You'll see it mentioned in this particular, in some of these texts, and I'll go ahead and read from them because I know we're going to run out of time. All right, let me finish Revelation 4 first. And when those beasts give glory and honor and thanks to him that sat on the throne, who liveth forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him that sat on the throne, and worship him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Now also think about he who sitteth on the circle of the earth. This is the same reference that what Isaiah was shown is the Most High sitting at the top on his throne, that his throne is at the very top, on top of the dome enclosure, and that the 3 heavens are below his throne, as I've shown in many images, like when I show all of the ancient Hebrew, the as far as the ancient Hebrew belief system, as far as the cosmology, that you'll see the throne of God sitting on top of the dome. It's all of this is referencing the same thing. And that Enoch, in his description of the motions of the sun and the moon, that he too was taken to this same place, the North Pole, and where Polaris, or where the throne of God is, and looking down upon the circle of the earth, that's how he describes the motion of the sun and the moon. And Isaiah also references it as well, the circle of the earth. And he cites it from the side as well, that the circle of the earth is the floor, and the curtain, the dome, the firmament spread above it, that the two together create the shape of a tabernacle or a tent. It's all the same thing. And so let me read you these other passages, which also relate to what I just read. And you'll want to go back and just click on the pause as you listen to this show again, the archives, and pull up all of these references that I'm going to be relating, because I'm going to kind of move a little bit faster now that I only have one portion remaining. This is Revelation 15. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues. For in them is filled up the wrath of God. And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are thy ways, thou King of saints. Who shall not fear thee, O Lord, and glorify thy name? For thou only art holy. For all nations shall come and worship before thee, for thy judgments are made manifest. And after that I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was opened. And these 7 angels came out of the temple, having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure and white linen, and having their breasts girded with golden girdles. And one of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials, full of the wrath of God, who liveth forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no man was able to enter into the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were filled. All right, another reference. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creatures was as the color of the terrible crystal, stretched forth over their heads above. And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Everyone had 2 which covered on this side. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. All right, I've got a few things that I want to definitely try to run through. And if you have any comments or any questions, then just give them to Kathy. She's my liaison in chat, and she will make sure that I get them, and then I will comment on your commentary or answer your questions. But again, there's always these references to the crystal sea. Even in the book of Enoch, there's the vision of paradise and the crystal sea. And as I said, paradise is at the 3rd heaven, right below the throne of God. And that there's this dividing. It's the invisible giving way to the visible, and as above, so below. And that what we see here on the earth, because we're in a fallen state now, and we're also living in a fallen form, but that when we were immortal and bright nature, just as Adam and Eve before they were cast out of paradise, that the cherubim was put into place to guard this place and to prevent humanity, as well as Adam and Eve and the rest of our ancestors, from being able to find their way to this northern polar region, in my opinion, and being able to access this portal, this gateway, this door, which is why in the Bible code, you'll find the reference to these particular things. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that when I go into it. But go to Ezekiel chapter 2, and this is where I'm reading about this right here. I'm going to read just a little bit more. And above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within it. From the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward, I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about, as the appearance of the bow that in the cloud in the day of rain. So was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. And so you'll see the same thing: the throne of God, the crystal sea, the fire surrounding, the appearance of sapphire, and also you'll have related to the firmament, above the firmament, New Jerusalem as the city of God, and that the city of God is where it is currently placed and dwelling in paradise. And let me share a passage really quick. It says this: and there were by the banks of the river trees planted full of different fruits. And I looked toward the rising of the sun, and I saw there trees of great size, full of fruits, and that land was more brilliant than silver and gold, and there were vines growing on those date palms, and myriads of shoots and myriads of clusters on each branch. And I said to the archangel, "What is this, my Lord?" And he said to me, "This is the Thracian lake, and within it the city of God. All are not permitted to enter into it, except whosoever shall repent of his sins. And as soon as he shall repent and alter his life, he is delivered to Michael, and they cast him into the Thracian lake. And then he brings him in the city of God, near the righteous." And I wondered and blessed God at all that I saw. And the angel said to me, "Follow me, that I may bring thee into the city of God and into its light." And its light was greater than the light of the world, and greater than gold, and walls encircled it. And the length and the breadth of it were 100 stadia. And I saw 12 gates exceedingly ornamented, leading into the city, and 4 rivers encircled it, flowing with milk and honey and oil and wine. And I looked, and I saw in the midst of the city an altar, great and very lofty, and there was one standing near the altar, whose face shone like the sun, and he had in his hands a psaltery and a harp, and he sung the Alleluia delightfully, and his voice filled the city. And after these things the angel said to me, "Behold, thou hast seen all the torments. Come, follow me, that I may lead thee away to paradise, and that thou mayest change thy soul by the sight of the righteous. For many desire to salute thee." And he took me by an impulse to the Spirit, and brought me into paradise. And he said to me, "This is paradise where Adam and Eve transgressed." And I saw there a beautiful tree of great size, on which the Holy Spirit rested, and from the root of it there came forth all manner of most sweet-smelling water, parting into 4 channels. And I said to the angel, "My Lord, what is this tree that there comes forth from it great abundance of this water? And where does it go?" And he answered and said to me, "Before the heaven and the earth existed, He divided into 4 kingdoms and heads, of which the names are the Pison, the Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates. And having again taken hold of me by the hand, he led me near the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and he says to me, this is the tree by means of which death came into the world. And Adam took of the fruit of it from his wife and ate, and thereafter they were cast out hence. And he showed me another, the tree of life, and said to me, this is the cherubim and the flaming sword guard. That's from the vision of Paul. One other description of paradise, and then a couple other things I want to share from the Thracian chronicles. And those men took me thence and led me up to the 3rd heaven and placed me there. And I looked downwards and saw the produce of these places, such as has never been known for goodness. And I saw all the sweet flowering trees and beheld their fruits, which were sweet smelling, and all the foods borne by them bubbling with fragrant exaltation. And in the midst of the trees, that of life, in that place whereon the Lord rests when he goes up into paradise. And this tree is of ineffable goodness and fragrance, and adorned more than every existing thing. And on all sides it is in the form of gold, looking and vermilion and fire-like, and covers all. And it has produce from all fruits. Its root is in the garden of the earth's end, and paradise is between corruptibility and incorruptibility. And 2 springs come out of which send forth honey and milk, and their springs send forth oil and wine, and they separate into 4 parts, and go round with quiet course, and go down into the paradise of Eden between corruptibility and incorruptibility. And thence they go forth along the earth and have a revolution to their circle, even as other elements. And here there is no unfruitful tree, and every place is blessed. And there are 300 angels very bright, who keep the garden, and with incessant sweet singing and never silent voices serve the Lord throughout all their days and hours. And so the throne, remember, is surrounded by the choir of angels, and the cherubim is placed there as guard to keep people from being able to enter into paradise. And so it's my opinion that the North Pole is where we find the ladder to heaven, and that Mount Meru or Mount Moriah or Mount Olympus, whatever you want to call it, Atlantis, Paradise, Thrace, Thule, that they are all the same thing. All right, now I'm going to share with you something that I just learned today, and this is from the Thracian Chronicles, which, again, you don't even bother looking this information up on Google because you're not going to find it. There are no English translations of this text. Me and my friends, we are working to bring forth the first English translations and release of the Thracian Chronicles to the Western English-speaking world. The passage that I'm going to read from is from the Chronicle of Longinus, which, if you don't know, which I didn't know this before, but Longinus is the Thracian soldier who served in the Roman army, and he was the one that pierced the side of Christ. And it was when the blood of Christ trickled into his eye and healed his blind eye that he became a disciple of Christ. And he also was witness to the blood red moon, to the earthquakes, to, all of these cosmic and earth calamities, which verified that indeed Yeshua was the Son of God. And so afterwards, he became a disciple. And the Thracian chronicles actually have a text where he writes about his testimony to his son. And I've been blessed to receive the first 8 chapters of this book. It's quite amazing. And at some point later down the road, I'll share some more of this text with you. But this is the portion which is talking about the lands that I'm speaking about right now. It says this: Look, I toured with the Roman army around the whole world in all Matarix and conquered victoriously many amazing and famous lands. But today I write to you about another land which is most famous, namely the famous land of Matarix, of the Son of God, which will be soon revealed for the whole world. So the worthy human sons and daughters may go in and go out from it and live there till they will populate it once and for all, like all the rest of the Matarix in the world. This Mataric is that land of dreams, the desired land, which in antiquity was populated by men and women of God before they visited today's known world. And while it was close to our world, there were still chosen travelers who crossed between it and the present day world. Then came the old flood and separated the worlds, and the earthly waters detached the Matarix from the other Matarix, like the islands are detached. But the heavenly tables landed far away from the first Mataric, therefore they were totally lost. Some wise men used to say that the first Mataric rose up to heaven because humans were guilty and had fallen forever from the first Eden. If this was the case or not, only God knows, but it is written somewhere that during many years in deep antiquity and younger times, many travelers came again across this island. Nobody knows how or why, but it happened during unknown periods through seas, airs, waters, and lands, and wrote down secret words which would be understood only by the worthy and dedicated people. They told about the lands of the island which they saw, about the cities and the wonders, and about other great secrets that they experienced there. All right, now I'm going to share something else. This is from a different text called the Thracian Chronicles, the Book of Atum and Ua, which is the book of Adam and Eve in Thrace. I also have to say this, that the Thracians predated the Sumerians by 2,000 years. And their language is also similar to the ancient hieroglyphics. And a Dr. Stephen Guide just recently, I think it was like 2006, he was able to decrypt the Thracian language and to decipher these texts that I'm reading about right now. And so it's only been recently that this information has come to light, because prior to his decryption of this, I would also add that he was murdered. He was poisoned for bringing forth this information. And he's no longer with us, but he wrote 3 volumes of the Thracian script decoded, books 1, 2, and 3. And 2 of those books have about 40 pages, which are English translations, because he wrote in Bulgarian, but there was a portion of the text included in English. Well, anyways, my friends are translating these texts into English, and because English is not their predominant or first language, I am helping them with their English translation. And so together we're working to bring this information forth. And so, which also, because the Thracians were Christians, it proves that the biblical narrative is not based on the Sumerian fallen angel mythology, but that it precedes, and this is even the Sumerian, the Thracian, they were the first post-flood culture to come up after the flood of Noah's day, but that, there are previous cultures and civilizations which are under probably hundreds of feet of mud and are at the bottoms of the oceans, which we do not have their mythologies or their accounts anymore. And so, but the Thracians, as I said, Thrace is the polar north, and they broke out from there. And the ancient land of Thrace also includes Bulgaria, which these stories come from. All right, so I want to share something from the first chapter, from the book of Atum and Ua. It says this. And nobody knew what was to be, only him who manifested through his word from beginning to end, because he knew what he said, and everything that he said would be made manifest in place and time. Coming into being there where something was said, it would appear manifest in time and place, the visible and the invisible within it and outside of it. Thus appeared first the heavenly place, which is the place where God dwells himself, together with Rhea and Isis. This is the place of the wish of love of the one, who is the three. This place is the most inaccessible to all, but those allowed entrance to it by the one in the three, the Trinity. They see his face for eternity. And under this place, there are other heavenly places according to the order and grades devised by God himself. There he established the earth as a garden paradise, flowing with milk, honey, and wine, and the trees bearing the bread of life, so that whoever eats from them will not die, but will live eternally as God himself lives eternally. And from there descends the river of life into four directions, into all living worlds, flowing with living water, providing life to all until the end of the universe. Humans were not allowed to know about these worlds. Only those found worthy by the sacrificial lamb from the day of the creation of the world, whose name is Isis, are allowed to learn about these worlds one after another, till they will know them all as he himself as God became known. And they will live together with Isis for eternity in the bosom of the Father and in the womb of the Holy Mother Spirit. All right, one last thing. And all these worlds begin in God's city, which is the city of truth, Jerusalem, and the city of peace, namely Salem. Blessed are those who are worthy of God's Lamb, who will be allowed to pass through his gates, because nothing unclean can pass through, nor a mortal who commits sin. All right, a couple other things really quick. For the Orphics, the island of Electrus, the seat of the gods, lies under the pole star in the furthest waters of Tethys. The Mandean Gnostics believed that an ideal earth and an earth of light, peopled by a divine race of supernatural humans, was situated in the north and separated from our world by a high mountain of ice. Let me see if I can share just another couple things with you. In Revelation 2:7, it says this. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. I'm probably going to run out of time, so I think I should probably just share commentary, and I will pick this up. But also another thing which I didn't have time to get to is that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is described in the Thracian chronicles as being a portal, as being a doorway, a gateway, and that when Adam and Eve ate from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they went into the hollow of the tree. And because they were transformed into flesh, having eaten, losing their bright nature and losing their immortality, they were not allowed to return to paradise, but they were banished from paradise and they were placed here to live in the cave of treasures on the earth in the garden of God. And so this is the difference. And in the next show that I do, I'll elaborate on the difference between paradise and the Garden of Eden. And I'll read those portions that talk about the tree as being a portal, as a gateway, and that when they went into the tree, into the hollow of the tree, they found themselves in the cave of treasures, surrounded by the garden land, but they were then transformed into flesh, into a fallen state of being, and placed here on the earth, because we know we're in a fallen world, and that this particular earth plane is under the authority of the rebel angels, the fallen angels, Lucifer, which I also wanted to read about these sides of the north, where in Ezekiel 28, Lucifer says that he's going to exalt himself above the stars of God and sit on the mountain of God in the sides of the north. And when I didn't even get a chance to go into all that material, but there's so much material that talks about how New Jerusalem is also in the sides of the north. And this is also the sides of the north is in Job 26, where it says that the earth is hung upon nothing. The reason being is because this is where this area of the earth is where it descends, and this whirlpool descends into the subterranean regions of the earth, down into Sheol in Abraham's bosom, where it is split apart and separated by this Arturian lake. And so we'll pick it up. If it's not next week, I might have a guest. Depends. The Morgile is going to join us at some point, either next week or the week after. Well, actually, the week following the week after. On January 23rd, Fritz Springmeier is going to join us to discuss just his latest revelations and the information that he is coming to knowledge to. I will do several more shows on the flat earth, but also know that I will be covering other secrets revealed from not only the enmity between the two bloodlines, the wheat and the tares, the serpent seed and the seed of the woman, and how it connects to the elites, the globalists, the transnationalists, and also to we as the masses, what are referenced as the useless eaters by the globalists. And I'll also cover other things like pre-existence, predestination. There's so much information I have for you. God bless all. Good night.